In our increasingly K-shaped economy where high-income families keep spending despite higher prices while lower-income families are struggling, the gap between the two is only getting wider and angrier. In response, some states are considering proposals to tax the wealthy to address affordability. In November, California voters may get to decide on a one-time billionaires tax, and New York's governor has put forward a tax for second homes in New York City worth more than $5 million. The nightcap is still here. Okay, Philip, I was just at the Milken conference. It seems like the super wealthy in California are going to pick up stakes and move out. How does one address this issue? Because the income divide is only getting worse, and it's only furthered by people are struggling. Every day people are struggling, and they're turning on the TV and they're watching the president say, I want $1 billion for my ballroom. The Trump family are making billions and billions of dollars, as is the Lutnick family. If you take the Forbes 400 rich list and timestamp it from the end of the Biden administration to today, that group of people's wealth has exploded. Sure. Well, the majority of the American people's hasn't, and they're angry. This anger is only getting more heated. What do we do?
I don't know what we do about it. I'll be upfront about that. I do think, though, that the threats to leave New York, the threats to leave California, I think what happens is people do that and they go from California to Texas and they're like, I kind of like California. California's a nice place. New York's a nice place. And I think that there is an appeal there that I think is hard to escape. I do think, too, though, that the wealthiest Americans have gotten away from the sense that they owe something to America. Right. And I do think that is sort of a through line for a lot of them, that there is something that they ought to give back. And there's absolutely there was an element of self-preservation when you would see the Rockefellers and when you would see the Astors and all these people put something back in the community. It was because, like, we know they hate us and we're going to, here's a nice library.
Well,
right?
Many would say now they feel like America hates them. So they've bought six jets and they're headed to New Zealand.
Right. Well, this is my point. There is a divergence between the way in which they see themselves and the way in which everyone else sees them. And one would think that at some point they'd be like, maybe it's worth considering the other side on this.
Okay, I want to share this. A recent study found that CEO pay at the largest publicly traded companies rose more than 25% in 2025. For average hourly workers, the increase was 1.3%. So the issue is that this idea that the system is working for a certain group of people, the wealthiest class, that they would also connect to the Epstein class, but not for the majority of the American people. How do we address this sentiment, this divide? Because it's bad.
Yeah, I mean, who are you addressing it with, right? Like, I think with people with money and resources, you have to make a moral case. You have to make a moral case. And you have to make a case for quality of life, too. If you are a wealthy person, you have people working with and for you. Don't you want them to have a good life? Don't you want them to be able to support you when you need them? Of course you do. That's why you need to pay into the system and make the city work for everyone. I think that's the case that, say, a Mamdani needs to be making to the very wealthy people who seem quite triggered by him in this moment having a pied-à-terre tax, which, by the way, is kind of a small version of what he wanted, right? It's the thing he could get Kathy Hochul to sign on to, which is if you have an abandoned apartment in New York that costs hundreds of millions of dollars, perhaps you should pay us a little bit for the privilege.
You know, this thing that I won this award for was about, frankly, billionaire accountability in a place where fans broadly could be convinced to care about it. Because it's sports. The thing I think about all of the time is, okay, I will grant that there are some very upstanding, in fact, great billionaires out there. Mm-hmm. I would just like them to identify and to stand up on behalf of the people who are suffering so we can identify the ones that are not.
Mike Bloomberg gave away $4.3 billion last year.
And we should celebrate that. And the people who are using this economy like a rigged casino should be the ones to be called out. And so when you go to the Milken conference and people aren't identifying the corruption that's happening, I'm sorry. What you lose is the shield of, but wait a minute, we're living the American dream. Because there's an abuse of it.
But let's be clear, there are extraordinary philanthropists there. There are people there solving issues. My question is, who are going to be the people to solve this divide? Because there are many extraordinarily successful and wealthy people doing great things. But this divide and this anger that we are facing feels scary at this moment?
I mean, I think it has to come from a policy perspective. I think there are great billionaires out there. Mark Cuban, I think you can add to that list. I like a lot of what. There you go. Right, I like a lot of what Mark Cuban says. I think he's done some great work, and he's a great advocate. He advocated very hard for Kamala Harris. But are we really going to be under the impression that these billionaires who go into the office with Donald Trump and then give him the Golden Award are going to somehow have this epiphany and be like, you know what, actually, I want to take care of people. And my bottom line is not as important as the single mother out there who needs some assistance. I'm not so sure about that. I think we got to go policy.
Here's the thing. People keep saying, like, we're creating American oligarchs. Do you know where the Russian oligarchs live? They don't live in Russia. Right. They live in London. They live in New York. They live in L.A. They live in Miami. So if you start to break our country down so we don't live in a country where we respect the rule of law, where we care for everyone, it no longer is this amazing place for these people who can live anywhere to live.
I think, what's the policy answer? I think we do have to tax them. I'm sorry. Like, I think the Democratic Party, if Zoran wants to take my policy advice, I would say, you know what? I think it's great to have $999 million.
But you know why? It's because, to your question about who solves this, money is power. And so it's not like there's the poor people and rich people who's going to solve it. The rich people have all the power.
Exactly.
Like, if this is going to be addressed, then that is where it happens. They have power through influence. They have power through direct actual sales.
And we will thank you for your good works, and we will not vilify you as a class of people. But guess what? We are going to tax you, because this is unfortunately the real world. And you guys are winning in a rigged economy that these people over here, the rest of us, are suffering from.